Okay, we're going to start. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Super excited because today is a topic that is quite in demand. There's a lot of people that were interested in that, so I'm happy and excited to share my information about this. Let's start with introduction. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Shani. I'm a certified holistic nutrition consultant, and I am the founder of Lemon Tree Nutrition. So this webinar is going to be posted both on my Facebook page, of course, and which is called Lemon Tree Nutrition Consulting, and on my website, which is lemontreenutrition.ca. So if you didn't have the chance to see this live, you can come back and see it whenever you're free. Some housekeeping before we start. This webinar is for general information only and should not be seen as a personal recommendation. Any decision you do or take after listening to this webinar is your own responsibility, and it is highly recommended to consult with your physician prior to making any dietary changes. All right, so let's begin. I don't want to take too much of your time, so hopefully we'll be able to keep it under 1 hour. Our subject is to keto or not to keto. A lot of people are confused about the ketogenic diet, are not sure exactly what it means, what it entails, what is involved in it, and what are you allowed to eat or not allowed to eat. So what we're going to do in this webinar is simply dive in to have a better understanding for you to be able to decide whether you want to keto or you don't want to keto. What is keto? Keto is short for ketogenic. Ketogenic diet is when, I'll explain the background. So the most common and fast fuel for our body is glucose, also known as sugar. When we eat carbs, we have readily available sugar. If we eat complex carbs, then it takes a little bit more to break it down to simple carbs. But overall, we are using glucose as our main source of fuel. When we don't eat enough carbs or we don't eat carbs at all, our body is so brilliant and amazing that it can go to a different source of fuel. The body has to provide the brain with fuel. It has to keep going even though we don't supply it with sugar. And what it will do is that the liver, in order to send through the bloodstream fuel for the brain, it will take ketones and turn them into the source of energy instead of carbs. So the ketogenic diet is actually a diet that has very low carbs. So we kind of like move the body into using ketones as a source of fuel instead of carbs. Type in if you are understanding what I'm saying so far, if this makes sense, and if it does, then great, we can move on. So the ketogenic diet is basically a low carb, very low carb, high fat kind of diet. And the goal in the ketogenic diet currently, not the original goal, but currently the goal is to have the body or give the body the ability to use ketones as a source of fuel instead of carbs. To understand a little bit, well, by the way, I want to mention that Atkins, paleo, and low carb diet are kind of similar to the keto diet, but not really. The keto is a little bit more hardcore type of diet. What's the history of the ketogenic diet? Just short and simple. It started about 100 years ago when some doctors were frustrated when they were trying to treat epileptic patients with medications and surgery, and nothing was helping. From the frustration and trying to find the best solution for the epileptic patients, they decided a starvation diet. The starvation diet kind of like is the same concept as the ketogenic diet, by the fact that it does not allow the body to receive any carbs as fuel. The body is depleted of carbs, and by that it creates ketones, and it has been shown that fasting creates ketones, and therefore the control over the epileptic patient's seizures was diminished. So it actually created a good result. The doctors were happy with that result. The people who were not happy were the patients, because they were starving, they were hungry, they couldn't eat for an extended period of time. Fast forward 10 or 20 years later, a doctor was trying to mimic that concept. And he said, well, instead of actually causing the patients to starve, let's try and create a situation where there are no carbs in their diet, only high fat and some protein. And it worked. So with the years, things were kind of adjusted. The goal was, of course, for the doctors to use the medication and the surgery, but when nothing was working, they turned into the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet technically is for patients who suffer from seizures of epilepsy. If we are talking about percentages of the ketogenic diet, it is about 60 to 70% fat intake. Carbs would be very low, sometimes between 5 and 10. It's a range. It depends on the person. It depends how extreme you want to go, but 5 to 10, and then the rest, 20 to 30, whatever is left, depending on the other percentages, would be protein. Today there are different types of ketogenic diet. Today we're going to talk about the classic traditional keto diet that I just mentioned, the percentages. What can you eat on a keto diet? We'll start with what you can eat, and then we'll move into what you cannot. The ketogenic diet, basically, because it's high fat, you want to turn into those foods that provide you with high fat content. And on the opposite side, very low carb content. So for example, the oils, so olive oil and avocado oil and coconut oil, butters, different kind of butters, avocados, nuts and seeds, eggs, yolks are very favored. And I know that some people actually separate the yolk from the white, so they are ensuring that they get the fat from the egg and less the protein, if they want to control that. Some kind of dairy, mainly cheese, milk, under 18% or 10%, not so much. Actually, cream, usually if you take cream in your coffee, that is encouraged as opposed to milk. So as you can tell, a lot of very, very high fat kind of foods. What you cannot eat, and I shouldn't say cannot eat, it's more you want to reduce as much as possible, are the following foods. Some dairy, as I've mentioned before, some cheeses, especially the ones that are very, very high in fat, very low in fat, fruits, grains, beans and legumes, starchy vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, slightly sweet vegetables like beets and carrots, and squashes, and of course most processed food, because those normally have a high content of carbs. I feel like a lot of people are, or many people are confused simply because We were fed for so many years with the information that fat is bad for us. It started in the 1950s when there was this big study over, I think it was 13,000 men from different countries that showed the connection between saturated fats and death. And so the health organizations in the world decided to go out with statements telling people, be careful of consuming diets high in saturated fats because they can be harmful to your health. So that was going on for a little while. And then manufacturers needed to adjust their products in order to make sure that they are more healthy for the consumers. So what they did is start to use vegetable oils. But remember that the manufacturer goal is also to have a very long shelf life to every product that they can. And so what they did is manipulate the vegetable oils in a chemical way that caused it to be hardened. And that, as a result, was a longer lasting type of fat. And today we know this fat, or we name this fat as trans fat, that everybody knows that is not really something we want to consume and is not very healthy. So it is very confusing. All through the years, we were told that fat, A, can make us fat, B, can harm our health, and many manufacturers started also creating a lot of fat-free products or low-fat products. And we were like, great, then we will lose weight because fat can make you fat. And now things are starting to turn over and the message is completely different. And we understand and learn as time goes by that fat doesn't make you fat. Hence the ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet, being based on high fat intake, encourages the notion of fat not fattening, but actually creating something different in the body that we were not used to. Let's talk about why would someone want to go keto? Why would someone choose the ketogenic diet? There are many, many reasons. And the first most important one is when a doctor would recommend a patient that is suffering from epilepsy to go on a ketogenic diet. That would be in a supervised way with a dietitian or a doctor, health practitioners, making sure that it's done properly. So that would be one. Unfortunately, today, the ketogenic diet had moved and shifted away from epileptic patients into a weight loss type of diet. And we will talk about the weight loss part of this diet, but for now we're talking about why would people go on it. So some people would go for weight loss. Some people have experienced an increase in their metabolism, so they would want to do that because eventually also that results in fat loss. Decrease in hunger. Some people report that because of the ketones in their bloodstream, their hunger is diminished. And of course, when you're not hungry, you eat less. When you eat less and intake less calories, you tend to lose weight. Another reason would be thinking that it could treat, maybe is not the word, but improve maybe certain inflammations in the body. Some people that are very overweight have inflammation in their bodies and therefore some weight loss due to any diet, but we're talking about the ketogenic diet specifically here, feel that this is one of the great effects of the diet. So reduced inflammation, and some people believe it would help with their diabetes. Why does keto work for some? Because just like any other diet, not all diets work equally for everyone. We are all different, and some people find it easy to do, some people find it challenging, some people lose weight, some people don't. It is true to every single diet. So for some people, it works for the reason that I have mentioned. For example, the feel of satiated status for a longer period of time. And that is usually due to two reasons. One is the fact that fat makes you feel fuller for longer. And the second reason is the ketones. As I mentioned, ketones can have a certain effect on your body that creates lack of hunger. Another reason would be, of course, eating less and weight loss, and that is usually the goal when people go on diets, any diet, not just the keto one. Another question a lot of people ask me is whether the ketogenic is difficult to follow. I think any diet could be difficult to follow if it is something that you see as a task, something that is restrictive, something that is hard to maintain long term. So the ketogenic diet could be perceived in a way as restrictive. If you are consuming high fat diet, which is the ketogenic diet, and low carb, if you feel like you want to have more carbs, due to the fact that you're following the ketogenic diet, you cannot have those carbs, and that is a restriction. By the way, one of the things that I didn't mention that you're not allowed to have or have very, very little of is alcohol. So imagine a situation where you're going to a party and or a barbecue or whatever it may be, whether it's a holiday, a family gathering, and there's wine or beer or whatever kind of alcohol around, and you want to have a little bit. You would need to calculate that into your overall carb intake, because alcohol translates in the body into carbs. So it could be perceived as a limiting or restrictive kind of diet. And if this is something that you're not ready to take or to follow, this is something that would make it a little bit harder for you to keep up with. Another thing would be maybe variety. If you cut off carbs, that translates into cutting off a lot of the fruits, a lot of the vegetables, a lot of the legumes and beans and grains. So technically, when you prepare dinner and you want a variety on your plate, by taking out of your diet all these components, you are left with very little. Yes, you are allowed a certain amount of vegetables in this diet, like asparagus or other greens like bok choy or kale, Swiss chard, things like that, spinach, but in a limited portion, actually a very limited portion. If you need to get to 5 or 10% off carbs, you need to really watch how much of those you are eating. So imagine your dinner plate is having a piece of protein that could be maybe a steak or a chicken breast. Next to that, you will have maybe a big piece of butter, so you can kind of slather the butter on your piece of protein, maybe some mayonnaise over your greens just to make them more fatty, or maybe a quarter cup of olive oil spread all over your greens. So you're always trying to calculate the amount of fat that you're having that would be very high in relation to the carb intake, and also to the protein. Whenever you have a piece of chicken or steak or whatever it may be, that's a very high protein product. So once you are about to eat that piece of protein, you need to calculate that the amount of fat in relation to it is quite large. So whether it's a difficult thing for you or not, that is a personal, subjective kind of decision or opinion. But I'm just trying to point out things for you to consider if you want to go keto. So we've mentioned maybe less variety, some restrictions, and another aspect would be the social limitations that I've mentioned before. If you want to have a glass of wine, or if you are invited to a dinner, the person knowing that you are following a ketogenic diet, the host, will probably need to adjust things in a way that you will be able to maintain that diet while going for a dinner party or a barbecue. So, or you would be kind enough to offer and say, you know what, I'm going to bring my own food. So again, the social limitation, and again, nothing wrong with that. If that's your decision, great. But keep in mind that these are things that you would need to consider if you're going keto. Another thing would be to consider is that 1 gram of carb and 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So imagine if you compare that you have a big bowl of salad filled with a whole variety of vegetables and maybe some nuts and seeds and maybe a small piece of protein on top. And on the other side, let's say that is 200 calories. And on the other side, to find the equivalent of 200 calories would be a huge heaping spoonful of nut butter. So how much food are you having? Here you have a big bowl of salad, 200 calories, and here you have a spoonful of nut butter, 200 calories. So if you're a person that would like to enjoy a variety and a salad and a big bowl of something, now that you cannot have a large bowl of carbs and you need to replace it with something high in fat, are you okay with that? And again, you may be okay, and you may be thinking that it's worth the investment and the journey, and that's fine. I'm just, again, trying to make you see that there are different aspects to going keto. In general, when you are going on a diet, you want to ask yourself, can I sustain it for a long period of time? And I think when you are asking those questions, you want to go with a list of pros and cons and see if they fit your lifestyle and if you are okay with that. And of course, the one big thing that should be your main decision of following a certain diet is the safety and health. If you are safe, if you are healthy, if the long-term implications are improved health, then this is probably the great diet, the best diet for you. But if there are contradicting informations and there are issues with some conclusions based on research that was done and you're not sure that would be a good fit for you, maybe you should reconsider a different kind of diet. And again, I'm not saying that keto is not for you. I'm saying that what you need to do is your due diligence and find out if this would work for you, if this will make you healthier, if this is something that you want to pursue. So let me help you with putting the pros and cons of the ketogenic diet. I think that by doing so, it will clarify things a little bit more. Again, if you have any questions, type them in and I will see them as we go. But for now, let me start with the pros. One of the biggest things that people are after now in our current society, because we are so lucky, most of us in the Western society, we are so lucky to have an abundance of food out there. One of the reasons where people are considering a certain diet is weight loss. And I want to reiterate, as I started with the ketogenic diet, initially the ketogenic diet was not a weight loss diet. It was done for epileptic seizure control. So one of the pros of going keto is weight loss, and I'll expand on that a little bit. The ketogenic diet works in a way that by depleting the body from a carb from carbs, by depleting the body from carbs, our fuel source will be ketones. And if you are having ketones in your bloodstream, there's a very high chance that it will affect your hunger levels. You'll just won't feel very hungry. So by eating less, you may experience weight loss. However, and this is a big however, a lot of research that was done have seen that the weight loss was caused due to water loss and not fat loss. So when we say weight loss, in this case, it's not comparable to fat loss. And what I mean is that when you weigh yourself first thing in the morning and you see a drop of 3 pounds, let's say, what happens in your body doesn't necessarily match the scale, because in your body, you may have lost water with the ketogenic diet, at least in the beginning, but still maintain the same amount of fat. And again, nothing wrong with that. If you are after weight loss and to see that you are weighing less on the scale, great. Then this is something that you may experience in the ketogenic diet. But if you are trying to be more defined, let's say you work out at the gym and you want to see a more defined muscle tone, you may not necessarily see it in the beginning and make it equivalent to the numbers that you see on the scale, simply because you haven't lost fat, you have lost water. So keep that in mind. Of course, when researchers were wondering about the ketogenic diet as a weight loss diet, they were saying, well, it's kind of like this high in the beginning. When you are starting a diet and you're immediately seeing and experiencing weight loss, looking at the scale, it makes you, it's like that boost of energy that tells you, hey, you're doing something right. You are losing weight. But is it the water that you're after or the fat, right? So this is something to consider. But as far as weight loss, yes, people have experienced weight loss on ketogenic diet. But when you're asking why, it might be due to caloric restriction or less caloric intake, which can happen in many different diets. It doesn't have to be necessarily the ketogenic one. It could be any diet. As long as you take in less calories than you expend, you will lose weight. Another pro would be being less hungry, which, as mentioned before, if you feel less hungry, you're less inclined to overeat. And that's something that many people see as benefit. Some people report an increase in energy and their focus. Again, this is a fantastic thing, but there are other diets that you can experience the same effect with, not necessarily the ketogenic. And another people report that they don't have, because they're not hungry and because they feel satiated for a longer period of time, they just need to deal with food less during the day. So they don't need to prepare breakfast and lunch and dinner and snacks in between and make sure they take it with them before the gym and after and to work and all that. But if you have had the chance to listen to my previous webinar, I was talking about intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting does the same thing. If you skip breakfast, for example, now you have to deal with breakfast. Now you don't have to deal with breakfast. You can just go straight into your next meal and, you are dealing with less food per day. So it's not something that is very specific to the keto diet, and you can find other diets that supply the same. So these are more or less the pros. You can see if these are some things that are appealing to you and go with those, but also have a look at the cons and see if any of those would make you struggle a little bit. One of the biggest things with having a high-fat diet would be the content of high saturated fat intakes. Butter and bacon and ghee and coconut oil are all considered saturated fats. Now, saturated fats are one of those things that have contradicting messages lately. Some say they are good for you, some say they are dangerous for you. So what I'm going to do is quote something that I read the other day, and I really, really liked it. It summarized things in a way that makes you think about everything that is going on with saturated fats. It's a paper that was written by Mark Houston a couple of years ago for the Institute of Hypertension and Vascular Biology. And I'll read it because I'm going to quote it. So what he said is, the question was, do saturated fats cause coronary heart disease? And what he answered was, the answers to this question have included yes, no, maybe, and we don't know. Multiple answers to the same question either suggest that the question is not posed correctly or that the studies are flawed and inconclusive, or both. So I thought it was quite well put. So I'm thinking, if there's a diet that introduces foods in high amounts that, whether they're good for you or not, is inconclusive, is not entirely safe, or maybe they are, we don't know, do you want to dive in deep into such a diet? So that's one con. Some people report when they start the ketogenic diet, diarrhea and constipation. So that would translate into a change in their gut, and this is something you may also want to consider. People were talking about less variety of foods, because when you decrease so many of the other options that are mainly carbs, such as vegetables and fruits and legumes and beans and grains, the ability to have different dishes on a regular basis kind of decrease. Short-term tiredness was reported, but that is personal. Some people actually felt more energetic, so that's again something that changes from one person to another. And I want to point something out that I've mentioned before, and that is eating less. Consuming less food can be okay to some people and can be not okay to others. And I'll give an example of an athlete. An athlete expends very high calorie overall during his training. And if it's an elite athlete, it happens on a regular basis. Those that follow the ketogenic diet can easily replenish their caloric intake, because fat is 9 calories per gram. So we were talking that, just a spoonful can supply you with, a spoonful of nut butter can supply you with a lot of calories. But on the other side of this, when you eat high-fat diet, you may not be as hungry, and the ketones produced in your bloodstream can also affect your hunger. So now you are simply not hungry. And although you want to consume more calories to support your activity, you simply can't, because you're not hungry. And for you to consume more calories will cause you to force yourself, and no one should force feed themselves. So eating less could be good for some people, because that would cause them to lose weight. But for some people, that actually can harm their goal, such as athletes. If they want to achieve a certain goal, but they don't have the energy to do that, it could interfere with their goal. Some people report that in the beginning of their trial of keto, they feel like flu-like symptoms, and that usually causes them to stop. What some people don't know is those usually go away if you do that properly, if you follow the ketogenic diet properly and you do it supervised and you make sure that you are getting everything that you need at the right time, at the right amount, in the right way, then the flu-like symptoms should go away. Those symptoms usually happens because of this change in the body. The body's, especially if you were used to have a lot of carbs before, the body will go into a bit of a, not a shock, but sort of, in order to adjust to the new diet. So flu-like symptoms. So you see, overall, there are some issues with that. I would like to mention my biggest two issues. I do not oppose the ketogenic diet. Again, if done properly, for the right reasons, in the right way, with the right supervision, and being checked that you are okay all the time. So you check your ketones, you check your sugar levels, you check that you are feeling fine. So I do not object it if done under all those circumstances. But there are two things that I find a bit challenging. One, I do not know, and correct me if I'm wrong, and please feel free to email me and tell me your thoughts about it. I don't know how you can get all the micronutrients in a ketogenic diet. And if you are in the nutritionist community, if you're a dietitian, a nutritionist, a nutrition consultant, or you are in the nutrition world, you all know that the intake of micronutrients, the minerals and the vitamins and the phytonutrients, should come first of all from food and not from supplements. So yes, a lot of people that go on the ketogenic diet will use supplements to supplement their lacking diet. So I personally don't see it as an advantage. I see it as a disadvantage because I like to get my micros, which are vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, from food first, as I feel most people should. The second thing that I have a bit of an issue with is fiber. We know that fiber comes from carbs, from vegetables, from fruits, from legumes, from beans and grains. And when you go keto, my personal question would be, where would you get enough fiber? And I did talk to someone and he said that you are eating fiber in the ketogenic diet. My question, is it enough? I am a big believer in fiber. I think it's a huge part of our health, especially our gut health. And today, more and more studies are talking about the connection between the gut and the brain via the vagus nerve, that the health of the gut directly has an effect on the health of the brain. So it could affect your mood, depression, anxiety, anger, and so forth. So for me, the question would be, do I get enough fiber to support a healthy gut? Because studies have shown that high fat intake can have an effect, not necessarily a negative one. What I'm saying is an effect over the gut flora. So whether the effect is this way or the other, we still yet have to learn, but there is an effect when you switch into higher fat diet and a lower fiber intake. So these are my two things. What do you need to know if you decide to go keto? What do you need to know? First of all, keep in mind, it's a therapeutic, clinical diet. So if you want to proceed with it, keep that in mind. Make sure you're doing it right. And as I've mentioned before, I want to repeat that again. Make sure you're doing it properly, supervised, controlled, checked, and that you are feeling okay. And when you're not, make sure that someone is aware of it, a practitioner is aware of it, and he will let you know, he or she will let you know whether it's okay to feel like that, it's a part of what the body is going through and its changes, or whether this ketogenic diet is simply not for you. So let's let a professional make that decision with you. Carb eating timing matters. For example, if you are waking up in the morning and you check your ketos, you want to make sure that your carb intake won't be the first thing that you do. It usually tends to be more towards lunch. So you would have higher fat in the morning, higher fat in the evening, and maybe a little bit more carbs at lunch. Another thing would be the combination of things. You never want to combine fats with carbs. I shouldn't say never. You want to try not to. It's less ideal. You want to go with proteins and fats. Proteins and fats, or carbs and proteins, but not fats and carbs. Another thing to remember is, if you're going to go keto, is quality versus quantity. The quality of fat is incredibly important in this diet, simply because it is known, it's not the only reason, but one of the biggest reasons. It is known that toxins from the environment, from your household, from your cosmetics, from stuff you eat, is held in fat. It is stored in fat. So same would be with animals. If an animal is fed on a very low nutrient diet, it will affect the quality of its fat as well. If the animal is in high toxicity environment, it will store the toxins in the fat. So if you will end up eating the fat from that animal, you are eating fat that may harm you. So for example, if you're trying to go for butter, I would try to go for organic butter that was taken from a cow that was pasture grazing and free roaming, and the most ideal conditions. I know this is difficult. Not everyone can afford it, but I would like you to keep that in mind. If you are going for something like that is quite extreme, at least make sure that you are doing a really good job by consuming food that will nourish you as opposed to harm you. So going with good quality fats as often as you can would be a good idea. Your choices of fats would also be important. Avocados are fantastic and they're high in fat. Olive oil and olives. And by the way, you have to make sure that you are balancing the omegas as well, because if you're taking a high diet of olive oil, you're now increasing the omega-6. And if you're not eating enough fish or taking fish oil supplements, you are decreasing the amount of omega-3s, and that could cause a bit of an issue. Another thing would be to remember that to activate that goal that we have with going keto, the mechanism of the body to fluctuate regularly and immediately, just like that, between carb burning and fat burning, you need between 3 and 6 weeks for it to start working naturally. And what do I mean? You can measure your ketones in the morning in the first week that you're trying, and you can see that it's the number that you're after and you're happy and everything is great. It doesn't mean that now when you're going to go for a sprint or a hard workout, your body's going to burn fat as opposed to carbs. What it means is that you are creating a slow process where your body eventually will be able to turn on fats as fuel, or if you're feeding it with carbs, it will use carbs for fuel. But in order to get that switch happening naturally, you have to experience and go keto quite hardcore for about 3 to 6 weeks in order for it to happen naturally. So a lot of people don't get to those 3 or 6 weeks because they break down. It's not a very easy diet to follow. So try to keep that in mind and try to understand that there's an end goal that may have some benefits for you. And again, not trying to convince anyone to go keto or not trying to convince anyone to not go keto. My job here today, I feel, is to give you the information to make the best decision that you can. I think that's it. If you have any questions, if you want to know anything, by all means, feel free to email me. In my social media, all the information on how to reach me is there. Visit my website. It is lemontreenutrition.ca. I will put this webinar in there as a freebie. There's a little tab called freebie, and you can go right there and find things that you can use for your own knowledge. I just started that tab, so as I go, I will put more and more free things for you to use. Feel free to share the information with whoever you feel would find this information beneficial. And that's it. Thank you for taking part of this webinar today. I hope that it was informative and that I've answered some questions. I'm wishing you a fantastic rest of your evening, and I will see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.